In this session, we're going to explore how the Chief Sustainability Officer role is evolving. And we're going to dig into some specific challenges and innovations through this discussion with two very interesting speakers. Claudine is a Sustainability Officer at Aviva, one of UK's biggest insurers. And Charlotte has the same role on the other side of the world in a very different industry at PETRONAS, which is Malaysia's state-owned oil and gas company. So you've both had quite expansive careers in sustainability, but come from very different backgrounds. Claudine, you are actually an environmental scientist to begin with. And Charlotte, I just learned that your background is actually in business and economics. Those are very different backgrounds just to even start the conversation. But we're going to try and basically figure out, maybe with you, Charlotte, how you came into sustainability and how that compares with what could be seen as a traditional path to a CSO role, if there is one.
Well, thank you for that question. So, in my mind, I have the strong belief that business has this tremendous potential to be a positive force in society. But capitalism, unchecked in the pursuit of profit, can have the opposite effect. So this is where the role of the sustainability professional comes in. So I've had this tremendous opportunity to work internationally in a number of sectors, anything from pop music, metal and mining, all the way to energy, but always in sustainability roles. So this is my calling from an early days, I would say, already in school. And what sort of is required in a role like that, and I really feel that you have to be curious and interested in so many different areas, because you are a strategic risk manager, you are an opportunity creator, you have to understand complexity, you have to be agile, but also creative, and be able to form the problems that you're trying to solve and really conceptualize what's happening in society inside your business. So it's a bit different from perhaps other trades where you focus very deeply. In sustainability, you have to consume everything, be a bit of a smorgasbord. My Nordic background comes out there, which means that you eat any food at all that's thrown at you. So I think that's the difference perhaps between a sustainability officer and any other trade.
And is there a traditional path to that career?
So when I started, there wasn't, but it was very clear that it was a growing space. I just happened to have the opportunity always to build the function in the company that I have joined. Today, I think it's very different. You can study this at university, and the career path can be clearer. There are now big teams in different businesses, and you can have build a career path within a company working in sustainability. Not so much when I joined, but I would also say that the titles have changed over the years, and who knows what our titles will be in 10 years' time.
That's exactly what we're hoping to get into today. So we've been hearing since morning that corporate sustainability is at an inflection point, and many companies are adapting. One way they're doing that is with changes with their people and their workforce. Since we have sustainability professionals in the room, I would like to take a poll. And so the question is, has your team structure changed in the last 6 months? And so to answer the question, please scan the QR code behind me and vote yes or no. And while you do that, I will move to Claudine, and then we'll come back for your results. So Claudine, specifically actually following up on what Charlotte said, how do you see CSO roles evolving in the future?
That's a good question. I'll get my crystal ball out and look at it. I think it's a tricky question because it's evolved so much, as Charlotte described. I think we're getting more. We went through a period where we were pushing rock uphill, right? And you and I know that really well, where it was really trying to make the whole organisation understand what this means. And then we went, I think, through a period of where everyone really got it. And all they wanted to do to be really good at it and to lead. And so we ended up with a whole load of ambitions, like Aviva's got one, net zero by 2040, lots of other organisations, net zero by this, that and the other. And I think that period then, again, our roles shifted. But I think now it's where the rubber hits the road, and we're actually seeing organisations needing to take action off the back of those pledges that they put out to actually make things happen on the ground. We are shifting a whole energy system from one shift to a whole other energy system. And that means that our roles become about how do we make that transition happen? How do we make that transition happen as change agents in those companies? And therefore, I see our role as partly kind of shifting to strategy. Not that it hasn't been there, it's always been there, but even more so. But then also about identifying risks and, more importantly, helping innovate and understand opportunities for the business, because there are winners and losers when there's a transition. Mm. And if you're a CSO in a business, you want your business to succeed. Often, especially in my sector, in the finance sector, it's quite difficult to get innovation going. And so I see my role really shifting into that space, into that more innovative space.
Thank you. So we'll check in a minute if the results are out to see what people are saying in the room. And they are out. The results are showing that it looks like just a bit over half the people here have already seen changes in their organizational structures. 55% said yes to the question and 45% said no. So that's quite interesting and reflective. It's still early days, but still reflective of the changes that we're seeing. Shifting to another gear, a big part of your role is also about building consensus. You said about telling people, you phrased it differently, but basically building consensus. And you mentioned Aviva's ambitions. PETRONAS also has pledged, has made some ambitions public, namely committing to net zero emissions by 2050. I'm especially interested in PETRONAS just because it's a hard-to-abate industry as an oil and gas company. And so the question to you, Charlotte, is how do you start to build consensus in a hard-to-abate industry like oil and gas, specifically working for a state-owned oil company which is reliant, where the government's revenues are very reliant on oil receipts?
So in a way, it's quite clear. Your direction is very clear, because most governments most countries in the world have signed up to the Paris Agreement and have their own national determined contributions, so the national action plans and targets. So as a state-owned enterprise, obviously that is our North Star. And we are indeed a hard-to-abate sector, so we must also support then that effort. So Malaysia has also reconfirmed its commitment to net zero carbon emissions by 2050, and PETRONAS has the same. Now, how do you bring the ecosystem with you? That's very, very important. A national oil company shoulders broader responsibilities than a pure commercial player. So you have to generate revenue for the government, but it's also to ensure energy security and building an industrial base. So how do you make sure that whilst you're balancing all those aspects, also with sustainability and addressing climate change, how do you bring everybody with you? And one example of that, for instance, in Malaysia, so we have several thousand vendors in the oil and gas services and equipment sector. So we have developed a program for them, which calls the PETRONAS Supplier Support Program, where we offer training as well as a disclosure platform, which is matched with financing. And this is to promote more greater awareness, but also practice around emissions management, but also human rights and nature actions. And this is to ensure that the industry is fit for the future. We are not an island as a company, so we have to bring everybody with us.
Thank you. And just briefly, Claudine, maybe to give your perspective from a very different industry and a very different context as well.
Yeah, sure. So the finance sector, and I guess a lot of our organisations are just a part of a system, aren't we? And we've got kind of one cog in the system. And unless you do build consensus from a regulatory perspective, from other partners, other sectors, you won't be able to tackle that system. So one good example is around nature, actually, that we've done recently. We donated 38 million to the wildlife trusts in the UK to restore temperate rainforests across the west side of the UK, because we only have 1% of our temperate rainforests left. Why did we do that as a business? I mean, it's a nice thing to do, but actually, insurance sector is very reliant on resilience and adaptation. And unless we do something like this to help mitigate things like flood risks, we won't learn, we won't know how to do that. So this is a really good attempt at that, but obviously it has lots of other benefits too. There's more biodiversity, there are healthy spaces people can go and visit, people can get involved in. So lots and lots of different benefits come with these kinds of examples as well.
Great. And I mean, would you call that one form of innovation? Is that a new thing that's happening in terms of...
It is, yes. So the pledge was done a couple of years ago. Wildlife Trusts have already bought bits of land across the UK and are rewilding. But off the back of that, the innovation is that we're bringing together a coalition from different sectors to make UK the most resilient economy in the world, looking at nature-based solutions and climate adaptation risks, so particularly flood risk. And then how do we create a financial model that can be replicable in other places in the world that are really going to make this work, because that's what's missing.
So for now, that initiative is actually a donation that you made to the Wildlife Trust. So how do you go from that to making it a financial...
That's what we're going to figure out with the coalition. Yes.
Okay. How about you, Charlotte? Is there any innovation that you're seeing help accelerate the transition of your business or your industry?
So we are a hard-to-abate sector. In the energy sector, it's very important there's a lot of investment in technology, but also business models and partnership models. We have to partner widely across sectors to move forward, because it's a whole systems change that we need in how both energy is produced but also how it's consumed. So in PETRONAS' case, we are firmly also committed to build what we call new business, and we have a number of different new value chains that we're working to develop with a number of partners. So this includes carbon capture and storage, renewables, hydrogen, electric fleet charging, we have biofuels, specialty chemicals. And for all of these new value chains, you have to work both on the supply and the demand. So as a good example would be carbon capture and storage, where our shipping arm is now also commissioning new ships for CO2 shipping. But at the same time, you also need to work at the customer end to make sure we can get the CO2 that we can then ship and sequester in Malaysia. So it's a very interesting space right now, because we have to build these new industries that will really create a lot of new opportunities, and a lot of innovation is still required. I would say not all technologies are in place today that we require to meet net zero.
Okay. And I'm just mindful of time, and so as we round up, I'll just ask you to just summarize. We've started with the people changes that we were expecting in your field, but how differently will your companies look in 2050? The title of the panel is The Next Generation. 2050 is exactly a generation away. I may be taking the title too literally, but the question for both of you really briefly is, how differently will they look like from what they look like now? Aviva first.
So I think hopefully still a very successful business in 2050, having achieved net zero by 2040, so already 10 years in. I think that would have innovated in order to adapt to climate change for the customer on the ground, and really made a difference in those customers' lives, in terms of those customers now healthy and happy and are able to get on with their lives.
Nice. And Charlotte?
So I think because we're in 2025 now, we
Yeah.
we realize that 2050 is not that far away. Last year it felt somehow different. It's kind of almost touchable. But by 2050, we would have reached net zero carbon emissions, and our customers would have also benefited from the clean energy solutions that we would have developed with them, and we would be thriving in harmony with nature and also achieved a just transition with creating more opportunities and better prospects for more people.
So for PETRONAS, what would you be producing if not oil and gas in 2050?
So there will be a little bit of oil and gas left, but emissions abated,
Okay.
much more renewables, green hydrogen, and a number of different aspects. I think the energy mix will proliferate a lot across the world, and this is really important, and we are investing a lot in that.